we all know the phenomenon they created with the iPhone, which is in itself a platform for developers and ecosystem to participate in. And the rest now is history, because for the first time in 14 years, Apple's revenues, not just its valuation, exceed those of Microsoft. But lest you be convinced that Microsoft is out of the race, the fastest selling device of all time was just released by Guinness, and it's not an Apple product. Any ideas? The Kinect. Microsoft's Kinect is officially on record today the fastest selling device of all time. They sold an astonishing 8 million units in 2 months for an average daily run rate of about 133,000 units a day. Not too shabby. What's interesting about the Kinect beyond that staggering number is that Microsoft seems to have taken a page from Apple in that it is now extending the welcome mat to hackers around the world to use the same gesture recognition technology that is in that Kinect to build their next creation. So we can't even conceive right now what the next killer applications might be. Some are talking about 3D photography as one potential opportunity. Others are talking about gesture recognition within the home, whereby I can take from my PC just with a wave of a hand and flick content right to my TV. Might just mean people like me watch more than 5 hours a day of TV. How scary is that for our society? Contemplate it. And finally, $1 billion. $1 billion. This is the inflection point this year for mobile advertising. This is how big the market is expected to be. It's expected to exceed $1 billion this year in the U.S. I think that's pretty shameful when you consider that in the U.S. the television advertising market is close to a $60 billion industry. When you consider that the online advertising market is over a $25 billion industry. When you consider that every single one of us in this room right now has a mobile device on our person, except for me, because I have a mic on right now, and that we check that mobile device anywhere from 100 to 200 times per day. Further, when you look at the global mobile advertising market, it's not much bigger than that figure, and more people in the world have access to mobile technology than they do running water. So what's happening, and why are we not leveraging mobile as the next big advertising platform? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that advertisers like me are no technologists, and we haven't exactly made it easy for them with all the fragmentation of devices that exist in this room right now to figure out how to intercept us with the right message at the right time, groomed for that device such that the quality of my brand is not compromised to the right person. Not so easy when your core competency isn't exactly technology. So with that, what we've got in front of us, my friends, is an opportunity. Because if you think about the networks that have been built, and certainly those are being augmented as we speak, but when you especially consider the business models that were developed, we developed business models for a 1.0 era. We developed a business model that was based on one-way communication, mainly text. Did any of us care about data? No, because we were in the voice business. So we would charge you minutes of use for voice, and then we figured data is just on the side, whatever you want, because who in their right mind would consume this much data? And now we see a very different landscape that has just evolved in the past 10 years or so, where it's about multimedia, two-way communication, where an ecosystem is developing applications and is quite content many times to use those underlying networks simply for transport and nothing more. And at the same time, we have to find a way for the business model and the ecosystems to evolve such that future investment is protected in the networks that connect us. So, we went and looked at this kind of differently at Alcatel-Lucent about 3 years ago now. And we said, you know what, there's definitely a disconnect here. The existing business models are not sustainable on their own to deal with the flood of traffic that's traversing the networks. And many of us, how many network providers in the room, just out of curiosity? Anybody? Well, certainly many of us serve network providers, hopefully, in the room. Network providers are very familiar with the right side of this chart, which is their challenge in this dichotomy is they have escalating traffic that we just went through, but their revenue per user is largely flat. I don't know, I didn't need an MBA to figure that's not so good, right? On the other side, though, what people don't realize is that content and application developers also have a struggle in this world that we're in. And that is, you have to think like a developer for a minute. If you think like a developer, and many of you are developers in this room perhaps, whether or not you ever shell out 1 red cent in coding or software to develop your application, the one thing universally that ties a developer is they shell out their time. It takes time to develop that application. Time is money, especially for a developer. So what happens when you have a proliferation of devices, Android over here, iPhone over here, tablets over here, set-top boxes over here, gaming consoles over here, and you want to develop an application that goes across those devices, you're likely looking at developing it several different times just to be able to accommodate. Well, what's interesting about all those devices is that there is one thing that unites them. That is the network that connects them. And there are capabilities that are inherent in that network that allow that developer to compress his time to market, to eliminate some of the fragmentation that naturally exists, and to get to market faster. Now, take note of this if you take nothing else that I tell you in the next 20 minutes. This is not about service providers winning at the expense of Google and Apple. That is absolutely antithetical, actually, to what the shift advocates. In fact, this is about realizing that this ecosystem, every player has some value. And in a service provider's case, many times that value of the network has remained behind a walled garden, not available to others. So our point is, once you start to expose those capabilities of the network and leverage the network as another development platform, you basically give the developer more options in the marketplace and you reinsert service providers into a new value chain. For those of you who have Apple and you're familiar with obviously the App Store, out of the 300,000 plus applications in that App Store, how many were developed by Apple? Oh, that's right, not a whole lot. In fact, Apple just created the environment, created the commerce engine, created the ecosystem that allowed players to actually tap into the intelligence of that device and create those applications that we now consume every day. But Apple is part of that value chain. What we're looking at is why couldn't the network be treated in much ways the same way. For those of you in the audience, please forgive if you are a technologist, this grossly simplified definition of an API, an application programming interface. For those of you non-technologists, allow me to explain. Now, how many cooks are in the audience? Anybody like to cook? Fancy yourself a good cook? Good. All right, so this is a true story. The other night, I'm watching, so I watch a lot of TV. I'm watching 5-ingredient fix, right? It's actually pretty good. And she's mixing up this dish where she's mixing peanut butter with seasoned rice vinegar, with soy sauce, with chili sauce, and spreading that over noodles. And I looked at my husband and I said, I don't know, that sounds crazy enough that that could work. That might be an interesting blend of flavors. My husband said, you're speaking crazy talk, there's no way. Made it the other night. I actually recommend this recipe. It was delicious. It was absolutely delicious. And I said, never in my wildest dreams would I have put those ingredients together, ever in my wildest dreams, because I am not a professional cook or chef. An API is much the same way in my simple mind, an ingredient. And there are different ingredients that developers can go to create their next application. And what might seem very basic to us or even strange and mysterious, actually to a developer becomes a masterpiece and something that is actually quite creative. And when you consider some of the APIs that exist, these are some of the capabilities that the network has, much of this still remains behind a walled garden approach for service providers looking to protect the integrity of the network. But let's just consider some of these. One, the network knows my location. Now you could argue, yes, so does my smartphone because it has a GPS. That's true. However, in the rest of the world or any other place where feature phones dominate, guess what they don't have? They don't have GPS, but guess what they do have? They have location based on that network, even in a triangulated way that you could use to kind of figure out where people quite a kerfuffle in the audience because there are extreme views on net neutrality. But that's just one aspect of quality of service. Another aspect of quality of service is to allow a developer to diagnose where his or her application may be performing sluggishly from client to server. And today, if something isn't working right, a developer painstakingly goes through the process of troubleshooting every node in between. And that costs him what? Time, which is money to him. So quality of service doesn't have to just be about bursting. It is a capability, an intelligence capability that exists in the network with or without political views attached to it. So what we wanted to look at was, if networks are opened up in a managed and controlled way as development platforms, would people actually embrace this notion? Would developers care? Would end users be willing to pay for advanced application? Do advertisers care? Do small businesses and enterprises care? Or is this all just a hope and a dream that actually puts service providers into a new value chain? Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not a hope and a dream, and I'm here to tell you, don't listen to me. Listen to 11,000 respondents across the ecosystem, developers of all shapes and sizes, enterprises of all shapes and sizes, consumers of all types of interests, advertisers, both client and agency, North America, South America, so we have developed countries, emerging markets. This holds weight. In fact, we quantified in the US alone a $100 billion opportunity, incremental market opportunity that exists when you insert new value into this ecosystem and create new value chains. That is the subject of the shift behind you. I'm going to give you just some of the top line findings from it. The first is I want you to change your narrative. Stop asking yourself what's the killer app. Ask yourself what's the universal need. If you look across this ecosystem, the universal need is driven by fragmentation. Developers I've already covered, they experience fragmentation. Advertisers even more so experience fragmentation because they're not technologists, and quite candidly, they shouldn't have to be. Users experience fragmentation because if I want to get my service to work seamlessly across any device, as long as I have the time and aptitude to put into it, I'm sure I can figure it out. But who really has that time and aptitude in the first place, right? And then service providers have fragmentation that perplexes them because service providers no longer can ask what's the next killer app because it doesn't necessarily exist. Even Facebook, I would argue, when Zuckerberg was creating Facebook, do you ever think in his wildest imagination he thought it could be liberating countries right now? I would argue no. As a college student who was interested in pursuing social conquest, I would think probably not top of his agenda. Yet we know that is one of many applications that Facebook is now serving. But fragmentation becomes the need, even despite the fact there is no killer app. Yes, I know some of you may go, well, video is the killer app, right? It's 50 to 60% of the volume. It's the killer app. Video utilizes the network, but how do you monetize it? That's the question. So the killer app is elusive because it's about monetization, not just utilization. And despite the fact that there is no killer app, what users do want are enhanced applications, whether that's by having additional location capabilities, presence capabilities, profiling capabilities, quality of service capabilities. Users respond differently depending on that ingredient that's inserted in that application. But at the end of the day, there's value in those ingredients themselves. One thing I got to make sure you guys take away, we beat it like a dead horse in the shift. Developers crave discoverability. Do not conflate that with reach. I consult with service providers all the time, and many of them are tier 2s, or many of them are in emerging markets, and they say, why would any developer want me? Because they're going to go to Verizon and AT&T because they have the gazillion subscribers. They're not going to want me. Well, I would submit to you that if you assume the developer craves reach, you would be right on that point. But they don't. They crave discoverability. There's nothing stopping me right now from going and developing for the App Store, and I get reach. Would you guys agree? I get millions of potential customers. However, I'm also competing against 300,000 plus applications to get my application discovered. So in many cases, developers developers actually prefer a smaller provider with a niche footprint, with a niche segment that gives them better discoverability chance. And that is why this is a game not just reserved for developed markets, not just reserved for big players, but available to all who choose to participate. Finally, the next one, second to last, bundling and support have no meaning. I come from the world of service providers, and I blame McDonald's on this, okay? It's McDonald's that conditioned this society. You get the value meal, you get a discount, right? And McDonald's really was one of the first to start that. You start with number 1, number 2, number 3, now there's like 20 value meals. But you get the discount. Service providers is the same way. They think bundling immediately, and they think, I've got to do voice, video, data, wireless, I give a discount. That works in today's environment when you have only a transaction between yourself and the end user. Don't break that model. However, when you're talking to developers, bundling has the opposite effect. The more APIs I bundle in one environment, I can increase willingness to pay on the part of that developer by 2 to 3x. Consider that for a minute. More is more. Why? Because if I know automatically that presence, profiling, and location naturally go together, are available through one stop, allow me to get to multiple devices, and allow me to go through testing and certification one time through one software development process, that saves me time. Time is money. Therefore, bundling is different. The other thing that's different, I also come from a world where if you don't answer the phone in 20 seconds, you will suffer consequences, be it from regulatory authorities or from customers that get irritated with you. Developers are low maintenance. In fact, they don't expect or want the service provider to be the first line of defense. They rely on their community for that. However, when that community fails them, they would like the buck to stop somewhere, and they are willing to pay for that incremental support, realizing you don't have to be the first line of defense, you just have to be available when that community isn't. And finally, the last one in the shift that you will see, and it's about a different marketplace. We used to talk in the 90s about owning the customer as a service provider. How do you own the customer? You own the billing relationship, and that was key. And then we talked about how do you get them on your portal and how do you get as much time with that user as possible. Ownership in this game is irrelevant. It is no longer about who owns the customer. It is about who owns the most information about that customer and who has a trust relationship with that customer that could potentially be monetized to third parties who would also love to have access to that information. That, my friends, is a very tricky fault line to walk. However, the shift will let you know that when we ask end users outright, whom do you trust more with information like your presence, your profile, your location? A service provider, an application developer. Service providers win that vote by a margin of 3 to 1. The question becomes, do service providers have that trust relationship precisely because they've never attempted to monetize it? Or does having that trust relationship allow them to monetize it and create even more value across this ecosystem and even more value to the end user? That's not exactly explained in the shift because we've done more research on this topic, but stay tuned. There's more work following the shift based on an entire study looking at identity, how we see ourselves as connected to this network, and what we're willing to release about ourselves and to whom to allow that to potentially be monetized. So with that, you got a $100 billion market opportunity in front of us. This is about an ecosystem. This is about a value chain. This is about innovation in the business model, not just innovation in the networks and applications and technology, which is happening anyway, but the business models remain the artifacts of the 90s that have not kept pace. That jeopardizes every single one of us in this room. Whether you serve the service providers and they are looking for how they generate a return on investment despite stagnating ARPUs and increasing traffic, whether you are a user of this technology, be it in education, healthcare, government, or as an end user who wants to see innovation continue to be stimulated, whether you're a service provider yourself, and whether you're a developer that wants to see continued investment in these underlying networks such that your application has a right to play as well. But at the end of the day, as I tell audiences, this isn't a spectator sport. This game continues with or without service providers in the mix. And so it is up to service providers You'll actually have to pay people then to take it off your hands because they'll say, who stretched this on the inside cover? But I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to present to you, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that this audience might have.
Got one for you here. Can you speak to the weird dichotomy of carriers basically being the ones that pay for all the infrastructure, but yet you've got the Netflix, the BitTorrents, the Google, are the ones that generate all the content that are paying for the infrastructure. Where do you see the pricing on that at all?
So the way that we would look at that, the question was, for those who can hear on this side, with the dichotomy of carriers having to bear the brunt of the investments in the networks, with the Netflixes and the YouTubes of the world creating the content that uses those networks, that dichotomy, how do we see that pricing model kind of correct itself, if you will, such that, we don't have that lopsidedness, if I'm understanding you right? What we would advocate is that, again, even those content providers have interest in what the network providers can offer them, whether that is quality of service, whether that is incremental profiling capabilities for customers that opt into that. There are certain capabilities that providers have that have been behind, again, that walled garden to protect the integrity of the network that we believe could be opened up in a managed and controlled way, and a new value exchange is now created between the content provider and the service provider, such that they now have value extracted between the two of them, and such that we create new value and a new revenue stream that comes in without always having to tax the end user, or without having to have a service provider potentially curtail investments because they can't figure out where new revenues might come from. And so that is, in the way of the different kinds of models, that can be done with per dip pricing. We tested several per dip models, actually found developers, especially as they expect the price of their application to go up, they actually do tend to favor per dip. Could also be the revenue share model, which has been very popularized today thanks to Apple's success. But there is a new value chain that can be created here that we've explored extensively to figure out how both of these worlds can coexist and cooperate with each other rather than staying at ends with each other. Okay, well with that, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Allison, you've painted a really compelling vision of the future. We really appreciate your forward thinking, spending time with us, being a great player in the telecom industry, a great colleague in the MTBC. So on behalf of us, I've got a great gift box here for you. I hope I see you on the desk this time I see you. Thanks for being here today. So, just a few wrap-up